Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lantern Sports Preview Show. I am your host, Curtis Groovy, alongside virtually my co-host, Kevin Lapka. Kevin, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, man. Good to be here with you virtually, like you mentioned. We got a big matchup this Saturday. Number 4, Ohio State with that new college football playoff ranking going up against Illinois at Memorial Stadium in Champaign for a noon kickoff. The last time these two teams played was back in 2017, Curtis, where Ohio State won 52-14. But it has been 3 years since these two teams have met. Curtis, what do the stats look like for these two teams in 2020?
Yeah, let's take a look at the offensive stats. Ohio State has 535.2 total yards per game. That's good for 7th in the FBS. Illinois, not too far behind with 381.8. That's good for 79th in the FBS. Here's where the biggest difference in their offenses come to play. Ohio State with 45.2 points per game. That's good for 4th in the FBS. Illinois with only 21.8 points per game. That is 100th in the FBS. Now, you might think they have a decent amount of yards per game, so why aren't they scoring a lot of points? Well, Illinois lost their first 3 games of the year, and I'm pretty sure everybody remembers that week 1 loss against Wisconsin, 45-7. But they have won their last 2. And in these last 2, their last game, they put up 41 points against Nebraska. So Illinois can score points, but the problem is that they rely on a heavy rushing attack. They do look like Ohio State a little bit. They use 2 running backs. It's a running back by committee. They average 5.1 yards per carry and 222.4 rushing yards per game. So they can run the ball. They can run the ball pretty well, but running the ball takes time. It takes a lot of time off the clock, so they can't score as many points as fast. As far as their passing goes, well, they've used 4 quarterbacks so far this year. So if you are rotating quarterbacks, I know they've had some injuries in the quarterback position. Nobody is going to get settled in. It takes time to settle in, to mold with the wide receivers. So that's going to take some time. And they have 159 passing yards per game. So they're getting it done on the run, but they're not getting it done through the air. And just if you wanted to know, Ohio State has 233 rushing yards per game and 5.2 yards per carry. So Ohio State's run game is technically still better than Illinois' run game. And Ohio State has the offense through the air to really make them pay. Kevin, what does the defensive stats look like?
Yeah, look, I'm the turnover man. I mean, a lot of these past preview shows, we've been talking about turnovers, but it's because it's important. And you saw what happened last game against Indiana. Yeah, you can get turnovers, but it is about how you capitalize on those turnovers. But let's look at the turnover margin per game for these two teams. Illinois, surprisingly good, plus 1.2. So that means they're ahead. They're getting more turnovers than they are giving away the ball. That's 10th in the FBS. Ohio State's still good right there, plus 1. 14th in the FBS. So you need to, again, watch how these turnovers are coming in. Illinois is 6th in the country in takeaways. So they are getting takeaways. And like we mentioned, I mean, Justin Fields has thrown 3 interceptions the past week. A different day for him. We'll see how he rebounds against a good Illinois defense as far as takeaways. Now let's look at passing yards allowed per game. This is an area where Ohio State has struggled. 290.2 passing yards allowed per game, good for 114th in the FBS. Illinois up there at 86 with 253.6. But it is interesting. And we saw Michael Penix Jr. of Indiana throw for 480 yards against Ohio State last week. You would like to see them lock up this kind of quarterback mix that Illinois has gone through. Like you mentioned, 4 different quarterbacks, Brandon Peters being the number 1 of them. So this is an opportunity for Ohio State to really bump that number up. And we're going to get to that in our over-under. But the first over-under we have today is for Curtis. 27 points in the first half. This is interesting, too, because Ohio State, if you have noticed, has started games pretty hot recently and then has maybe sizzled off a little bit in the second half. So this 27 points in the first half is a good measure here based off of their past performances. Curtis, what you going with it?
Yeah, well, Ohio State's offense is no secret. It's no secret to anyone in the whole country what Justin Fields can do. And you got to think about last week. He had his worst career game last week and still threw for 300 yards and had 4 touchdowns. So, and I just talked about Ohio State's running game, 233 rushing yards per game, 5.2 yards per carry. Obviously, they're getting it done. Master Teague is a bulldoze back. He's definitely getting it done on the run. Trey Sermon has looked really good too in his games. So I am going to actually take the over. I think Ohio State comes off hot, and they come off hot. And I think they do score 27 points in the first half, and I think they score way more than 27 points at the end of the game. So, Kevin, you're over under Illinois 200 yards passing on Saturday. Over or under?
Well, I'm sure people are looking at this thinking, well, what the heck? 200 yards, that's not a lot. Well, Curtis mentioned before, Illinois averages 159 passing yards per game, but we just mentioned earlier about Ohio State's passing defense. So this is why we're choosing this for this over-under. It's a terrible passing offense against a mediocre passing defense in Ohio State. I mean, they have talented players across the board. They just really need to hold up and lock one of these guys up. And this Saturday is the day for them to do that. So I'm going to go under on this. I think Illinois goes under 200 yards passing. You also mentioned, the carries versus the pass attempts. Illinois passes the ball 23 times per game, which is not a lot in college football, but they run it 43. So it's going to be hard for them to get over 200 simply because they don't give their quarterbacks that much of an opportunity. So you have to look at the amount of times they pass the ball. It's a low amount, one of the lowest in the FBS, and they run it at a really high clip. So I'm going to go under for that. I think the Ohio State pass defense really locks up this Saturday and kind of makes a name for themselves.
Yeah, Illinois has 4 total passing touchdowns on the whole year with 3 interceptions on the year. So that passing game for Illinois is definitely going to be tough, and it's going to be tough to get something going for them for sure. That's going to do it for us for the Lantern Sports Preview Show. Make sure you look out for us after the game for our after show. And as always, you can follow us on all social medias and our YouTube. I'm Curtis Gruby. That's my co-host, Kevin Lapka, and we will see you next week.